Hey, welcome guys. Good morning, evening, or afternoon. Today we are going to go over the calibration of Weiser antennas, which is largely more technical than we've done in the past, but there's a reason for this, in that the antenna calibration actually feeds into why and how this system is able to be installed quickly and simply and efficiently. The antenna calibration provides the backbone for how you're able to put these antennas in and not aim them, you're not tuning them, you're not measuring them in space, and so it becomes a self-physical installation. You're physically able to do this yourself because of the calibration at the end. So although it's a bit technical, it actually is pretty practical from a PO to end of project timeline point of view. This calibration process cuts a substantial amount out in different ways. So we'll get into that. As a primer for those that have only watched a few videos, or maybe this is your first one, Weiser is a system of antennas and tags. You can think of us like industrialized air tags or tile, same kind of principles, although a lot more fancy under the hood. We have tags that go on items. We have antennas that go up in the rafters of a facility or on your columns or your walls. So these are, and then we can provide the very tight, probably about meter accurate positioning of all of your tags across your giant facilities. And we can have thousands of tags across millions of square feet, hence the industrial scaled part that I said before. So antennas are up in the facility. I have a screen up here. You can see those red dots. Those are actually our antennas. They look like this. Some of them have an in and an out for Ethernet. Some of them are just wireless. So in our office, we have a mix of them. You can actually see some of the Ethernet connected ones here on the screen. They look like that. And the rest are just wireless. And by wireless, we mean these are just receiving power. 5 volts, could be a wall outlet, could be a battery, could be a solar panel. Essentially, it's all the same. I will do another video about the different types of antennas, but you'll find in essence, it's really the same antenna element with just different boxes attached to it to provide different sources of power. So with that all being said, we'll get into the meat of it. As a disclaimer, you're really not expected to see or do much of this as a customer. It's kind of fun and entertaining, but this is really a Weiser technician screen that we're looking at. This is the server that's calculating all of the data. This is where we would go in, turn and twist all of the knobs to make sure things look good at your facility. So as a customer or even as a partner or white label provider, you're not really expected to know how to do any of this. But as I said earlier, it's pretty fundamentally important as to how the system can do what it can do. So I'm going to show kind of in the weeds a little bit, if I may, on how it does that. We're looking at our office here. I've already done some things. I've loaded the floor plan, I've scaled it, and I've discovered the antennas. I've put them where they are. You can see I actually can click and move each of these antennas, and I've roughly put them where I know they are on the map. So I've really kind of already done, but we're going to start working our way from the end backwards so you can understand the calibration screen and what information it provides. There are a lot of antennas in this office. That's intentional to get very tight accuracy. There's nothing stopping you from doing that in your use case in your facility. I would argue that at an industrial level, most of the plants we're in, there really isn't much of a practical difference between 2 inches of accuracy and 2 to 3 feet of accuracy. Is it really worth putting a lot of antennas into a smaller space in order to get that precision? Usually not. So a good rule of thumb for larger facilities with a practical application of 2 to 3 foot of accuracy per tag is about 75, 80 foot distances between your antennas in a rough grid. And you'll see in just a second why it can be a rough grid, if it even needs to be a grid at all. But that's a good way to kind of calculate in your mind how many antennas it might take in your facility. If you want additional information on how to calculate that, or have any idea about rough cost estimates for antennas and tags, we're pretty open and available to discuss that with a contact email on our website, phone, forms, support at wisersystems.com, as well as sales at wisersystems.com. Really any channel to reach us. We're happy to walk through the math. We don't necessarily need to sit you down at a 3-day timeshare resort to tell you what it takes to cover your facility. So, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So, in calibrating here, I'm going to go ahead and pop on Calibrate Arena, and you're immediately going to see a lot of crazy lines and shapes on the computer that may or may not make any sense initially. But what this is going to be providing us is actually a lot of valuable information to those that know how to read it. Again, you are not expected to know that, but the wiser technician will absolutely know how to read this screen. And what's going on here with all these bubbles and these circles is essentially each antenna around the facility is targeting a specific antenna. Each time I click through here, you see how those circles change, those bubbles change? That is us targeting a different antenna in the space. Not every antenna is going to see every other antenna. Physically impossible, especially with very large sites. But all of the neighbors will at least attempt to give you a circle. So what is that circle? Well, it might be readily apparent that it's some sort of range. Close. It's actually a measured distance from the antenna to the targeted antenna. So in this case, I've targeted antenna 6. All of the other antennas are providing me a distance. They don't know direction, so that distance, instead of it being a line, is a circle. I know that antenna is 35 feet from me. I don't know which direction it is. So here's where it gets fancy. Once you have enough additional neighbor antennas, we can mathematically determine, basically just basic geometry of where that antenna is in space, based off of all the other distance measurements. This isn't physically where that antenna is. This is a software determined where that antenna is in an attempt to match the physical location. So instead of installing this antenna perfectly aimed this way, and I've measured 962 inches into the ceiling, 242 inches out from the wall, and I've made sure that I've placed that there, and then I can place the antenna in the software like this, they're actually just sharing all of this information to get us close enough. And you can see there's actually some variance in this measurement. That's great. I'm seeing variance, the wobbles are, maybe 2 inches or so. That's great. I would say even wobbles of 1 to 2 feet in practice in a facility is fine. It's getting us to the point where we can locate our items, our assets, our WIP, our people, our parts within about 2 to 3 feet. And it does it all quite quickly. So as you start to understand that the calibration of these antennas is actually what provides us a quick, easy install. I don't have to measure. I don't have to tune it. I can just stick it up. Even if the Wiser survey had said, put the antenna on the wall, and we come through here and look at the calibration and we say, what about antenna 6? Oh, it's not on the wall, it's in the corner. Okay. So we would have likely determined that by walking around the facility, but the software is already doing it for us, is getting us 90% of the way there, right? So of course there will be a physical audit of your antennas as part of this process, but that physical audit of your antennas is 2 to 3 days, not 2 to 3 months. And so we're really cutting down the time from PO to project completion as much as we can, all based off of this calibration, because those differences in the physical installation come out in the wash when all of the antennas are sharing that distance data together, right? So let me take a step backwards from the finished product, and we're actually going to start more of what a Wiser technician would see from scratch. So I'm going to take all these antennas, take them off of the map, and we're just going to boot it up from the beginning. And so what I'm hoping this will demonstrate is the time that it would take is pretty fast. In fact, if your facility is small enough, we've actually developed an auto-calibrate feature. It's actually getting better each month as we go with larger facilities, but it'll get you 90% of the way there pretty often. So I'm gonna click auto calibrate here, and you'll see pretty quickly, it's gonna make a shape for me right away. It's gonna say, these antennas are oriented this way. Important to note, independent of floor plan, they're making all of these measurements, whether or not they're in a wall or behind a wall or doing all of that on their own. It doesn't matter what floor plan we're shaping on top of. I can literally just push this in, look at that. And we are maybe even more than 90% of the way there. That looks pretty close to exactly where we were before. This isn't to give you false expectation that your 1 million square foot facility will be a one-click install, but it does get us pretty far. We can split you into smaller groups, do a lot of these auto calibrations, piece them together. We can do 500,000 square foot more so in 2 to 3 days, like I mentioned before, which is a big difference down the road. So from a practical sense, this calibration, although it's a little technical and you wouldn't really be expected to know how to do these things, it does have an impact on how the system is able to do what it does and how it's able to do it simply and quickly. So, enough for today. If you want more information or more in-depth analysis, more math behind this even, let us know. So we have contact email, phone, forums, support at Wiser Systems, sales at Wiser Systems, really anything, LinkedIn. I think we're everywhere now, so just find a conduit that makes sense to you, reach out. We'll be happy to give you any more information on this as long as it's not patent protected. So we're very ready and happy to share any of this sort of information. So I hope this was useful. I hope you had at least some enjoyment out of this. I enjoy making these videos, so we'll leave it there for now. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.